Inmates Execution Records is bringing to you the part 2 of the oldest criminals executed in the history of Alabama. The first person, which is a continuation of part 1, is James Edward Barber. On July 21st, 2023, James Edward Barber, a 64-year-old white man, became the first person executed by the state of Alabama in 2023. His death by lethal injection at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore marked the culmination of a 22-year legal saga rooted in the brutal 2001 murder of 75-year-old Dorothy Epps, a Madison County grandmother. Barber's case drew national attention not only for the heinous nature of the crime, but also due to its intersection with Alabama's controversial history of botched executions and debates over capital punishment. This essay examines Barber's life, the crime that led to his execution, the legal proceedings that followed, and the broader implications of his death within Alabama's criminal justice system. James Edward Barber was born in 1959 in Huntsville, Alabama. Little is publicly documented about his early upbringing, but court records and testimonies from his trial later revealed a history of substance abuse and sporadic employment. By the 1990s, Barber had accumulated a criminal record that included charges for theft, burglary, and assault. His struggles with addiction to crack cocaine and alcohol were frequently cited in court as factors contributing to his criminal behavior. Barber's relationship with the victim, Dorothy Epps, began in the late 1990s when he worked odd jobs for her and her husband, Roy Epps, in their Harvest, Alabama home. Described by neighbors as a loner with a volatile temper, Barber reportedly grew close to the elderly couple, who occasionally hired him for yard work and household repairs. This trust would later be shattered in an act of violence that shocked the quiet community. On the night of October 25, 2001, Dorothy Epps was alone at her home while her husband visited a relative in Tennessee. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Barber arrived at the Epps residence under the guise of borrowing tools. Once inside, he launched a vicious attack, beating Dorothy with a claw hammer and stomping on her face and chest. Autopsy reports later revealed she suffered multiple skull fractures, broken ribs, and severe internal injuries. After killing her, Barber ransacked the home, stealing jewelry, cash, and a .38 caliber revolver. Dorothy's body was discovered the next morning by a neighbor who noticed the front door ajar. Madison County Sheriff's deputies quickly identified Barber as a suspect due to his prior connection to the Epps family and his absence from the area following the murder. A statewide manhunt ensued, and Barber was arrested 3 days later in Fayetteville, Tennessee, after attempting to sell Dorothy's stolen jewelry at a pawn shop. During interrogation, Barber confessed to the murder, claiming he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol and needed money to support his addiction. "I didn't plan to kill her, but she recognized me and I panicked," he reportedly told investigators. Prosecutors, however, argued that the brutality of the crime, particularly the excessive force used, indicated premeditation. Barber's trial began in 2003 in Madison County Circuit Court. The prosecution, led by then District Attorney Tim Morgan, presented overwhelming evidence, including Barber's confession, DNA matching his blood at the crime scene, and pawn shop receipts linking him to the stolen items. Dorothy's family testified about her kindness and the trauma inflicted by her death. Roy Epps, her husband of 54 years, described Barbara's betrayal as a knife to the heart, telling the jury, "He ate at our table, and we treated him like family." The defense, led by court-appointed attorney Larry Marsili, did not dispute Barbara's guilt, but sought to avoid the death penalty by emphasizing his addiction and troubled upbringing. A psychologist testified that Barbara suffered from intermittent explosive disorder and impaired judgment due to chronic drug use. However, the jury rejected these arguments, deliberating for just 4 hours before convicting Barbara of capital murder. In 2004, he was sentenced to death. Over the next 2 decades, Barbara's case wound through Alabama's appellate courts. His legal team filed multiple appeals, arguing ineffective assistance of counsel and racial bias in jury selection. Barbara is white, as were all 12 jurors. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear his case, allowing the death sentence to stand. Barbara's execution date was initially set for February 2022, but was postponed following public outcry over Alabama's botched lethal injection of Joe Nathan James Jr., who endured a 3-hour ordeal during his July 2022 execution. In response, Governor Kay Ivey paused executions to review procedures, stating, "We owe it to victims and their families to get this right." Barbara's lawyers seized on the moratorium, filing a lawsuit alleging Alabama's history of cruel and unusual executions violated the Eighth Amendment. However, in June 2023, the state announced it would resume executions, scheduling Barbara's death for July 21st. On the morning of July 21st, 2023, Barbara was served a final meal of steak, baked potato, and blackberry cobbler. He met with family members, including his sister, who later told reporters he expressed deep remorse. At 9 p.m., Barbara was escorted to the execution chamber. According to media witnesses, his final words were, "I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I pray God forgives me." The lethal injection protocol, a 3-drug cocktail of midazolam, rocuronium bromide, and potassium chloride, was administered without visible complications, a stark contrast to Alabama's previous executions. Barbara was pronounced dead at 9:56 p.m. Dorothy Epps' family released a statement to the Alabama Attorney General's office. "Today, justice was served. Dorothy was a loving mother and grandmother, and we hope her memory can now rest in peace." Keith Edmund Gavin is the last oldest inmate killed in Alabama. On July 18, 2024, the state of Alabama executed Keith Edmund Gavin, a 64-year-old black man, by lethal injection for the 1998 murder of William Bill Clayton Jr., a 68-year-old white delivery driver in Cherokee County. The case, spanning 26 years, intertwined themes of recidivism, systemic failures in the criminal justice system, and the moral complexities of capital punishment. This essay reconstructs Gavin's life, the crime, the legal battles, and the execution, drawing from court records, media reports, and advocacy documents to present a comprehensive narrative. Keith Edmund Gavin was born in 1960 and raised in Chicago's gang-infested public housing projects, where violence and poverty shaped his adolescence. By age 17, he had survived severe beatings from gang members, and at 19, he was convicted of murder in Illinois for killing a rival gang member. Sentenced to 34 years in prison, Gavin served 17 before being paroled in 1997. His early release, critics later argued, reflected systemic flaws in parole evaluations, as his violent tendencies, rooted in a traumatic upbringing, were inadequately addressed. This oversight would have tragic consequences. On the evening of March 6, 1998, William Clayton Jr., a Korean War veteran and father of 7, finished his deliveries for Corporate Express Delivery Systems in Center, Alabama. He parked his van at a Regions Bank ATM to withdraw cash for a dinner date with his wife of 38 years. Unbeknownst to Clayton, Gavin, who had traveled to Alabama with his cousin, an Illinois Department of Corrections employee, had targeted him for robbery. Eyewitnesses, including Gavin's cousin, testified that Gavin approached the van, shot Clayton twice, and shoved his body into the passenger seat before driving off. When an investigator from the Cherokee County District Attorney's Office pursued the van, Gavin exited the vehicle, fired at the officer, and fled into nearby woods. Clayton, mortally wounded, was pronounced dead at a hospital. Gavin's arrest hours later revealed a chilling detail. He had been paroled just months earlier for the Illinois murder. The cousin, initially charged as an accomplice, became a key prosecution witness, corroborating Gavin's actions and prior gang affiliations. At his 1999 trial, prosecutors emphasized Gavin's criminal history, including the Illinois murder and a prior attempted murder charge, to secure a capital conviction. For witnesses, including the cousin, placed Gavin at the crime scene. The jury deliberated for 75 minutes before recommending death in a 10-2 vote, which the judge accepted. Alabama's law, unlike most states, did not require unanimity for death sentences, a point later criticized by death penalty opponents. The sentencing phase proved contentious. Gavin's court-appointed lawyers called only 2 witnesses, his mother and a Jehovah's Witness minister. The latter mispronounced the minister's name and elicited damaging testimony, suggesting Gavin blamed others for his actions. Mitigating evidence, such as Gavin's traumatic childhood, exposure to gang violence, and the psychological toll of his prior incarceration, was absent. A federal judge later ruled this omission constituted ineffective counsel, but an appeals court overturned the decision, upholding the death penalty. Gavin's appeal spanned 2 decades. In 2020, U.S. District Judge Karen O. Beaudry found his trial lawyers constitutionally inadequate for failing to present mitigating evidence, including expert testimony on how Gavin's upbringing and incarceration history impaired his judgment. However, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals reversed this ruling in 2022, deferring to Alabama court's original findings. In his final days, Gavin filed a handwritten appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing indigent status to waive filing fees. The court denied his request hours before the execution, calling it a state law issue. Separately, Gavin sued to block a post-execution autopsy, citing Islamic beliefs that autopsies desecrate the body. Alabama acquiesced, marking a rare concession in its execution protocol. Gavin's execution began at 6:09 p.m. on July 18, 2024, at Holman Correctional Facility. Strapped to a gurney, he uttered his last words, "I love my family," and recited prayers in Arabic lifting his index fingers in a gesture symbolizing monotheism. A consciousness check confirmed his unconsciousness before lethal drugs stopped his heart. He was pronounced dead at 6:32 p.m. In his final hours, Gavin ate ice cream and Mountain Dew, declined a last meal, and met with spiritual advisors and attorneys. His calm demeanor contrasted with the turmoil outside. Amnesty International and anti-death penalty advocates had petitioned Governor Kay Ivey for clemency, arguing his trial's inequities. William Clayton's family described him as a slice of Americana Army veteran with a gregarious spirit and strong work ethic. His son Matthew, who witnessed the execution, condemned Illinois' parole system for releasing Gavin. Could it have done a better job protecting citizenry? Could that have prevented my father's murder? Prosecutors and Governor Ivey framed the execution as long-awaited justice, citing Gavin's guilt and lengthy appeals. Yet the case reignited debates over non-unanimous death sentences, racial disparities in sentencing, and the ethics of executing individuals shaped by systemic trauma. This is a true inmate information for the oldest inmates executed in Alabama State. To be updated daily, subscribe to our channel now. Next to be uploaded tomorrow. Watch out